In late 2022, a fashion and music empire valued at $2 billion vanished. It took exactly 18 days. During an October podcast interview, Kanye West publicly claimed he could make anti-Semitic remarks, and Adidas would never drop him. Within days, the German sportswear giant terminated their decade-long partnership, wiping out the bulk of his net worth. To understand how a collapse this fast happens, we have to look at the 20 years of corporate enabling that preceded it. Years of massive profits and cultural dominance created a dangerous illusion, convincing an artist that he was entirely immune to the consequences of his own actions. In the early 2000s, the dominant aesthetic in hip-hop was defined by oversized jerseys and a hardened street image. Kanye West was a producer pushing soulful, pitched-up vocal samples, wearing bright pink polos and loafers. Record executives bought his beats for Jay-Z, but they routinely dismissed his requests to rap. He forced his way to the microphone anyway. Releasing The College Dropout under Rockefeller Records, he introduced themes of religion, family, and personal insecurity. The market rewarded him immediately, establishing him alongside the biggest names in the industry. This chart visualizes the sheer scale of his music career, tracking his sales as they rapidly climbed to 160 million records worldwide. Add to that 24 Grammy Awards, placing him among the top winners in music history. By ignoring what the labels wanted and leaning into his own eccentricities, he built a global fan base. Early on, he learned a highly specific lesson. Breaking the rules and acting against industry standards results in massive financial payouts. He applied that same defiance to design. After early collaborations with Nike proved restrictive, he moved to Adidas in 2013 to launch the Yeezy brand. He demanded creative control and royalties, treating his apparel lines with the exact same obsessive perfectionism as his albums. This area chart maps out the financial reality of that partnership, showing the Yeezy brand expanding to generate $2 billion a year. That single sneaker and clothing line eventually accounted for roughly 10% of Adidas's total global revenue. Owning the trademark secured him a $2 billion personal valuation from Forbes. He held immense leverage over one of the largest sportswear companies on the planet. When a single individual drives that much of a public company's bottom line, the normal rules of corporate conduct start to bend. The executives needed his profits, creating an environment where extreme behavior was tolerated as long as the shoes kept selling. For years, public outbursts were treated as the cost of doing business. From declaring a sitting president didn't care about Black people on live television, to interrupting award speeches, the culture largely absorbed these moments as the messy byproducts of creative genius. By the 2010s, the controversies became more frequent and personal. Longtime collaborators and friends distanced themselves as he engaged in public feuds and erratic media appearances. He then pushed his audience's loyalty to the limit with deeply polarizing political alignments, endorsing right-wing figures and making shocking statements about American slavery. He also spoke openly about his diagnosis of bipolar disorder. While a serious medical reality, his health struggles were frequently cited by fans, the media, and his corporate partners to minimize the damage of his increasingly toxic behavior. The tension snapped at Paris Fashion Week in October 2022. He debuted shirts featuring the slogan "White Lives Matter," drawing intense backlash from the fashion industry and civil rights groups. Up to this exact moment, every time he crossed a line, a brand had stood by him, and a product had sold out. The market had spent decades teaching him that he was an untouchable asset, immune to the rules that governed everyone else. Instead of retreating, he escalated. Over the next 2 weeks, he launched a barrage of anti-Semitic statements across social media and right-wing podcasts, culminating in a tweet threatening the Jewish community. The corporate response was swift, with major brands severing ties simultaneously. High fashion house Balenciaga dropped him within days. His talent agency, CAA, cut him loose. Gap, which had already begun winding down their partnership, immediately stripped Yeezy products from their physical and digital shelves. Adidas held out slightly longer, but the public pressure became insurmountable. The company officially terminated the Yeezy partnership, knowingly swallowing a projected $1.3 billion revenue loss rather than continue producing his designs. This graph illustrates the immediate financial devastation. Without the Adidas royalty structure, Forbes recalculated his net worth, dropping his valuation from $2 billion down to just $400 million overnight. The limit to his power had finally been located. The protective shield provided by his corporate sponsors evaporated the exact moment his public relations cost exceeded the value of his sneaker sales. This comparison chart reveals his refusal to accept that loss. While the Forbes estimate sits at $400 million, he recently published a valuation from an independent firm, claiming his music and trademarks alone still make him worth $2.77 billion. His recent independent album releases under the Vultures title have suffered from poor critical reviews and chaotic rollouts. The elaborate stadium listening parties and high-end aesthetics have been replaced by a much more isolated, fragmented operation. His name remains toxic in the broader corporate sphere. When he was booked to headline the 2026 Wireless Festival in London, major sponsors like Pepsi and Diageo immediately pulled out, simply to avoid any association with him. For 2 decades, he operated under the assumption that his talent and profitability placed him above the system. But his collapse proved a cold reality of modern business. No amount of cultural influence or creative output can outlast the bottom line.